this passage from Luke chapter number 2, verse 41 to verse 49, it's a passage, but verse 49 is where we get our series from, where Jesus says, don't you know, can we put it in the New King James Version, where he says, don't you know I'm about my Father's business. So that's where we get kingdom business. So Jesus was a businessman. All right. So, but there are things that I just saw there that I feel like we can learn from, right? As believers. So starting from verse 41, right? It says, I'm going to read here. It says his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. Let's quickly go to the next verse. And he says, as he was 12 years old, you look at the age. He was what? 12. He was 12 years old. He says they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. So they were consistent in the things that they were doing. All right, let's go to the next verse. It says, and when they'd finished the days, they returned. The boy Jesus, is the boy Jesus, right? Lingered behind in Jerusalem. And Joseph, his mother, did not know it. So many a times when they would travel in a group because they were going for an event. It was an entourage. They were going to Jerusalem for the Passover feast. So you will find that there are hundreds of people that are traveling. The kids are also traveling amongst themselves. The elderly are traveling. So there were various dynamics in terms of the way they would travel. Remember, they would be walking. I think you have seen it over the movies, the way they would be walking as they were journeying together. So that is the scenario. Let's go to the next verse. But supposing him to have been in the company, they went a day's journey. So they thought he was amongst the crowd. He's somewhere, as a 12-year-old playing with other kids, right? He says, but supposing to have been in the company, they went a day's journey and sought him among their relatives and acquaintances. So they were looking amongst him where they would expect to find him. And I think that is so profound that these parents, they had so much trust in Jesus. I think they had raised him, and I think he was a proper child that they could literally leave him amongst their acquaintances and they would expect him, and they never had issues. So they would travel a day's journey without really looking at where he was, what he's doing. I don't think he was naughty, right? So let's go to the next. But they did not find him. They returned to Jerusalem seeking. So they had to go back, right? And he says, now it was after the 3 days they found him. He says, now it was after the 3 days they found him in the temple, right? He says, sitting in the midst of both listening to them and asking them questions. He says, after 3 days, they first found him in the midst of what? Teachers, people who are teaching the word. And he was what? Listening to them. This is Jesus. He was listening. This is Jesus listening to them. He was under their tutelage. He was listening to the rabbis in that time who were in the temple. And he was listening and asking them questions, right? Because he wanted clarity. Let's go to the next verse. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. Where they could say for a 12-year-old, this child, the way they answer, the way he's asking questions, the way he's answering them, is way, way beyond his generation. All right. And then let's go to the next verse. It says, when they saw him, they were amazed, and his mother said unto him, Son, why have you done this to us? Right, so they are not happy. If it was our parents, the spanking was going to come. It was definitely something was going to happen. It says, look, your father and I have sought you anxiously. All right, and then this is how he responds. He says, and they said to them, why do you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my father's business? This is his response. The parents are not happy. And it's understandable that obviously he is God, he is the Messiah. And obviously it's understandable that the parents were worried about him. But says, don't you know? Why are you asking? Don't you know that I'm about to be my father's business? So to him, the kingdom business was very personal to Jesus. It really meant a lot to him. That's where we're gonna get our series from. right? But I want you to see what happens here. And it's, for me, this is where I see that, timing is very important, all right? Let's go to the next verse. And he says, they did not understand the statements which he spoke to them. They didn't understand what he was saying, all right? Let's go to the next verse. He says, they went down with them and came to Nazareth, and he was subject to them. So as much as he says, don't you know that you're about my father's business, he still complied going with them. Because we can tell that already at 12 years of age, Jesus wanted to start ministry. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. Jesus wanted to start ministry. But it wasn't the right time. That's why it says it was subject to them. When you read the scriptures, it wasn't time because for the Messiah to come, there had to be a forerunner. John the Baptist had to make the way for Jesus to be able to do his part. John the Baptist had to fulfill all righteousness by baptizing Jesus into the ministry. So it wasn't time. As much as there was passion, as much as there was the zeal, the timing was off. That's why he says he was subject to them. To him, he wanted to start. He was already in the church spaces. He was in the church office. He wanted to do the work. But he says he was subject to them. I want you to look, but his mother kept all these things into her heart. Let's look at the next verse. It says, and Jesus increased in what? It's in relation to the space that we find him when he's in the temple. It says he increased in wisdom. In that wisdom, yes, he increased. It says he increased in wisdom and in stature and with favor with God and with men. He began to grow. He began to grow. Timing is key. You might have the right thing. You might have the right heart towards something, but timing is key. Because there are a lot of characters. Sometimes we tend to say, why are things being delayed? Why are things... Sometimes it's not the right timing. You might feel certain way about strongly about a certain thing, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's the timing. In Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God. He began to understand more of his assignment. That's the important thing of time. You begin to understand more of your calling. You begin to grow. You begin to see. This is 12 years. So we are looking from 12 to 30. That's like we're looking at 18 years of growing in wisdom and in stature. Let's go to the next verse. Now in the 15th year of Tiberius' reign, Rome began to tetrarch. Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judah, Herod being the tetrarch of Galilee, his brother Philip tetrarch of Luthia, and the region of Trachonitis, and Lysias tetrarch of Abilene. Let's go to the next verse. While Annas and Caiaphas were the high priest, the word of the Lord came to John, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. Right? Let's go to the next verse. You see, they had to be this fulfillment. They had to be also before the ministry of Jesus, they had to be the calling of John. John also had to be called into the ministry. And he had to do. Remember, when they were children, Mary and Elizabeth, they knew how things were supposed to happen. Because the angel of the Lord had told them prophetically that this is how things are going to happen. So it's always important that whenever we are journeying with the Lord, sometimes we want to rush things, but God is not in that space. We are yet to grow. We need to learn to grow into that space. Can I get an amen? Amen.